Hello everyone, this is LATHA AKULA. In this video, we are going to study about the next concept in the mental nutrition, that is the metabolism of nitrogen. So here in this metabolism of nitrogen, we know that living organisms, they have a carbon, hydrogen and oxygen. So apart from this carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen is also the one of the most prevalent element in the living organisms. But here this availability of this nitrogen in the soil is very limited, and here these plants has to compete with the microorganisms for this available nitrogen is available in the limited quantities, right? And this nitrogen will act as a limiting nutrient for natural and agricultural ecosystems, but because this nitrogen is available in very limited amount. Now we'll see what is a nitrogen cycle. What is nitrogen cycle? If you see the nitrogen in the atmosphere, this nitrogen will exist in the form of dinitrogen form. Between these two nitrogens, a triple covalent bond will exist. And in that atmosphere, the nitrogen will be present like this. And how much amount of the nitrogen is present in the atmosphere? Nearly 78% of the nitrogen is present. But that much of amount of nitrogen is present, but plants cannot directly absorb that dinitrogen. And though the nitrogens, through the process of nitrogen cycle, the nitrogen is available to the plants. And how this is released into the cycle? From the atmospheric nitrogen, the atmospheric nitrogen will enter into the soil either by the biological nitrogen fixation, or by the industrial nitrogen fixation process, or by the electrical nitrogen fixation process. By any means, the nitrogen will enter into the soil pool. Here in this soil pool, the nitrogen is first converted into the ammonia. It is first converted into ammonia, and then this ammonia is converted into nitrite, and this nitrite is converted into nitrate. So this process of conversion of ammonia to nitrate is called as nitrification process. In the soil, the nitrification process occurs, and here ammonia to nitrate is converted by the bacteria Nitrosomonas and Nitrosococcus, and whereas this nitrate is converted into the nitrate by the bacteria Nitrobacter, and this nitrate will be used by the plant, and this nitrogen source will enter into the plant, and from the plants the animals will be taken up. So the animals depends upon the plants for the food, right? Here from the plants, the nitrogen will enter into the animal biomass also. After the death of these plants and animals, their bodies will be decayed, right? So the decaying biomass will release the nitrogen in the form of ammonia. That process is called as ammonification. By the process of ammonification, again from the living organisms, the nitrogen will enter into the soil pool. And sometimes this nitrate is converted back to the dinitrogen. This nitrate is converted back to the nitrogen, dinitrogen form, that is elemental nitrogen form, which is inert one. And how this occurs? Here in some soils, some marshy soils or some anaerobic conditions will prevail. In that anaerobic condition, some anaerobic bacteria like Pseudomonas, Thiobacillus will grow, and they convert this fixed form of nitrate back to the elemental form of the nitrogen. That process of releasing the nitrogen back to the atmosphere is called as denitrification process, which is done by the bacteria Pseudomonas and Thiobacillus. So by this denitrification process, the nitrogen will be entered back to the atmosphere, and from the atmosphere, by the biological nitrogen fixation, industrial nitrogen fixation and electrical nitrogen fixation, that will enter into the soil. Like this, the nitrogen will cycles from the atmosphere to the soil, and from the soil to the atmosphere. This is called as nitrogen cycle. Next process is nitrogen fixation. What is nitrogen fixation? The process of conversion of elemental nitrogen to the ammonia. This is called as nitrogen fixation. And this nitrogen fixation is done in different process. One is by atmospheric nitrogen fixation process, and second one is by industrial nitrogen fixation process, and third one is by the biological nitrogen fixation process. In the atmospheric nitrogen fixation process, how it is done? by the lightning, from the during rains will get lightning, right? By the lightning or UV radiation, enough energy is released. That energy is used by the nitrogen to combine with the oxygen and form the nitrogen oxides. The oxides of nitrogen is formed by this. And next one is industrial nitrogen fixation. Industrial nitrogen fixation means what? During the industrial combustion process, automobile exhaust and power generation stations, they release some amount of the nitrogen. And next one, biological nitrogen fixation. Biological nitrogen fixation means the reduction of atmospheric nitrogen or inert atmospheric nitrogen into ammonia by the living organisms is called as biological nitrogen fixation. The living organisms was fixing the atmospheric nitrogen to the ammonia. That process is called as biological nitrogen fixation. And what are the living organisms that are participating in this? Some prokaryotic organisms. Prokaryotic organisms means bacteria and cyanobacteria. Cyanobacteria is also called as blue-green algae. So these organisms, they fix the atmospheric nitrogen, and the microbes which are fixing the atmospheric nitrogen are called as nitrogen fixers. And the microbes, they have an enzyme called a nitrogenase. By means of this enzyme, they are able to fix the atmospheric nitrogen, and this nitrogenase has the ability to reduce the nitrogen. And here in this biological nitrogen fixation, what is happening? The elemental form of the inert form of the nitrogen is converted into the ammonia by the nitrogen fixers by using an enzyme nitrogenase. And here, these nitrogen fixing microorganisms, they may be present in the soil in the free living form, or they may associated with the plant in symbiotic form. Free living form means they were freely present in the soil. They fix the atmospheric nitrogen and release it into the soil. And symbiotic nitrogen fixation means what? They were associated with the plants and they show symbiotic association and fix it within the soil, within the plants. That is called as symbiotic nitrogen fixation. And if you see the examples of free living nitrogen fixers, Azotobacter and Baserunkia. These two are the free living nitrogen fixers, but these are aerobic form. We need to remember which organisms are aerobic and which organisms are anaerobic. Azotobacter and Baserunkia are the aerobic free living nitrogen fixers, and whereas the Bacillus, Clostridium, Rhodospirillum. We need to remember these three also. Bacillus, Clostridium and Rhodospirillum, these are anaerobic organisms. Anaerobic means what? They will not use oxygen. In the absence of oxygen, they grow better, right? So those organisms are called as anaerobic organisms. These three are the anaerobic free living organisms. These two are the aerobic free living organisms. And now we'll see the examples of symbiotic bacteria. So symbiotic bacteria examples are the Rhizobium and Frankia. This Rhizobium fixes atmospheric nitrogen in the leguminous plants, whereas this Frankia, it fixes the atmospheric nitrogen in the non-leguminous plants like Alnus, where it fixes in Alnus plants. And now we'll see the examples of cyanobacteria which fixes atmospheric nitrogen. So some of the free living nitrogen fixing cyanobacteria examples are Anabina and Nostoc. So these are the cyanobacteria, right? These are also called as blue-green algae. They have chloroplast in them. So by using those chloroplasts, they are able to prepare their own food material. Hence they are the autotrophs. So in addition to the photosynthesis, they will also do the nitrogen fixation process. And here this Rhizobium and Frankia, these organisms, they live as aerobes. When they are present in the soil in the free living condition, they will maintain the condition. But when they enter into the roots of the plants, they converted to the anaerobic condition because the consists of enzyme nitrogenase, right? This nitrogenase enzyme is sensitive to oxygen. Hence, they have to maintain the anaerobic condition. So this is about the table. Already we have learned about the examples, right? That is a simple table. So this is Rhizobium. It is in unicellular form and it is a heterotroph. All the bacteria are the heterotrophs only except these cyanobacteria. Heterotroph means they cannot prepare their own food material. They will depend upon the other organisms. Here, they show symbiotic association with the leguminous plants. Frankia, it is in filamentous form. It is also heterotroph. It will also exhibit the symbiotic association with non-leguminous plants. So where it exhibits the symbiotic association in alnus plant, right? And Anabina is the cyanobacterium. It is a filamentous form and it is autotroph. Mostly it is a free living. Sometimes it may exhibit a symbiotic association with non-leguminous plants like rice, etc. Next step is ammonification. Next concept is ammonification. What is ammonification? Here, the nitrogen is present in different organic forms, right? In dead plants, dead plant bodies, the nitrogen is present. Dead animal bodies, the nitrogen is present. And here in our body also the nitrogen is present in the protein form. And human beings, birds, insects, fishes, all of those organisms, they excrete some waste material, right? Those waste material will be in the nitrogenous form only. Here the decomposition of organic nitrogen means what? Proteins and also the nitrogenous excretions. Nitrogen excretions means urea, uric acid, ammonia. So those are called as nitrogenous excretions of the different living organisms. Decomposition of all these, and also the plant bodies and animal bodies also have some amount of nitrogen, right? All that nitrogen is decomposed into the ammonia. That process is called as the decomposition of the organic nitrogen into ammonia is called as ammonification, and that process is done by Ammosis, Bacillus vulgaris and Actinomycetes. So these organisms, these bacteria, they convert the nitrogen to the ammonia. Next one is nitrification. Nitrification means what? Ammonia. Here ammonia is formed, right? That ammonia which is formed in that previous step, it is volatile. It is in which form? It's in volatile form. That means it will re-enter into the atmosphere. But most of it is converted into nitrate by the microorganisms. The ammonia is converted into the nitrate by the organisms. This process is called as nitrification. Ammonification means what? Nitrogen to ammonia is called as ammonification. Ammonia to nitrate is called as nitrification. And this nitrification is done by the soil microorganism, and it occurs in two steps. It is done in two steps. In the first step, ammonia is oxidized. Here we have seen three oxygens, right? This ammonia is oxidized into nitrite. Ammonia is oxidized into nitrite in the first step. And here it is mediated by nitrosomonas and nitrosococcus bacteria. And this nitrate, along with this nitrate, some amount of energy and water is also released. This is the first step. And in the second step, this nitrite is again oxidized and converted into nitrate. First, ammonia is converted into nitrite. Next step, nitrite is converted into nitrate. And here, these two are the oxidation processes. And here, what are the bacteria? Nitrobacter, nitrocystis. We need to remember Nitrobacter, nitrocystis. They convert the nitrite to nitrate. Here also some amount of energy is released. These nitrosomonas, nitrosobacter, nitrococcus, all these are the chemoautotrophs. Chemoautotrophs means what? They use chemicals as the energy source.